Welcome everyone to Trend Talks Life. I am your host, Erin Tomie, and today we're talking to Trend Micro Field CISO for Australia and New Zealand, Andrew Philp. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Erin. Thank you so much for having me. Real privilege to be on.
Of course, I'm so happy to have you, and I would love to just start with you sharing a bit about your role here at Trend Micro.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So a lot of people say, what is a field CISO? And it's quite a special role for me, actually, because it gives me the ability to understand our customers across this region, understand their requirements in a cyber perspective and their challenges, and then be able to do a bit of research and match that up with our strategy and make sure that we can help them on that journey. So that's my role. It involves a lot of getting out and speaking to customers, one-on-one, as well as big events that we're doing. And yeah, my 11th year at Trend, so I've done a number of roles, but really enjoying this role over the last couple of years.
Well, Andrew, as we were working to set up this conversation, one of the things you shared with me was that there are a lot of lessons endurance sport teaches you in business and cyber. I would love to dive into that idea, and maybe let's just start with how you became an endurance athlete and what that journey has looked like for you.
Yeah, thanks. I thought it would be a little bit of a different theme to sort of talk about and how those worlds intertwine. I think like a lot of people in my younger years, I did a lot of, activity, a lot of different sport, and that led into a little bit of, a desire to do a lot of cycling and running. I did some big cycle races when I grew up in New Zealand, including a big race that goes around Lake Taupo there. I ended up doing a marathon as well, just because it sort of seemed like a good thing to do and a challenge to kind of push myself. So I think I was always motivated to try and push myself to achieve that next goal. But when I relocated to Australia, I got married and had kids, I probably fell into a trap that a lot of people do, which is not prioritizing that activity and that lifestyle. Put on a lot of weight, and I really wasn't very happy going through that process. So I sort of, hit a time. I'd been at Trend for a few years. I've been really well supported. The culture had been amazing. And I sort of just got to a point where it's like, right, I felt like this is a time to focus on getting back to who I was from an activity perspective and a physical exercise perspective. So I dropped a heap of weight in a year. I dropped about 35 kilos. I'm not sure what that is in pounds, probably about 80 pounds or something. And I guess with that renewed energy that gave me, I was like, right, let's get back into this endurance lifestyle that I had. When I was younger, I did a lot of cycling and running, but I'd never done any swimming. So I re-picked up this goal that I had, which was to do Ironman Triathlon. And I just trained for it. I learned to swim, and I just put everything that I could into it so that I could pick up and do that. And yeah, it was a really difficult but really enjoyable journey that I went through.
What was the initial reaction from the trenders around you when you started and kind of came up with this goal? And I'm sure there was that initial meeting in the office where you shared, oh yeah, I'm going to learn how to swim. And I mean, to do an Ironman triathlon, that's not like a 100-meter swim. It's not a short swim to learn how to swim to do that. What was kind of that initial reaction when you started sharing this goal?
Yeah, and I think that's the first part of that, I guess, where those worlds meet, right? Is the initial reaction was, I think people kind of knew me as a bit crazy by then and sort of wanting to go after different goals. But the first thing was, I guess, there was disbelief, why would you want to do it and can you do it? But what I've found is as you bring people along on that journey, and if you're quite vulnerable in the way that you're doing that and the challenges that you have, then it actually kind of rubs off on people a little bit, and particularly the swimming bit, because that was very difficult for me. It was very difficult to learn in adult age how to do that. So I think as people sort of came along that journey, they almost share some of that joy that you get when you eventually manage to swim a length of the swimming pool, and then you swim a K outdoors, and then eventually you can get out to that distance that you need to do. So I think the reaction was one of being incredibly supportive, and I think that's a real privilege of the people that I get to work with, and also being able to share some of that experience and share some of those lessons that I had along the way was something that could actually help other people. And and help them try to aspire to particular goals that they're trying to do as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned it a little bit there, but I would assume most people wouldn't initially relate endurance sports to business and cybersecurity. And I'm assuming that some of those challenges that you kind of wanted to inspire people to tackle, I'm sure they weren't always health and fitness related. You kind of tied it into what you're talking to them most of the time, which is cybersecurity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of, for me, it comes back to a couple of different aspects to it. So, cyber is a specific area, but also just business life that can apply to just about any industry. The kind of the key lessons that I picked up in the business life, and I had the privilege of actually being able to share this with, kind of our whole team across the region, kind of at the beginning of that whole journey was that, I do Ironman Triathlon, it's long distance triathlon. Ironman, and as a brand, has this tagline called "Anything is possible." And I think part of that is, if you set yourself towards a particular goal, so you're looking in the right direction, and then you instigate all of the different things that you need to, you can achieve amazing things. And that type of methodology and goal setting transfers easily across to business. That's kind of the first thing is making sure that you set out what you want to achieve. And that might be business, or it could be anyone in their own life. They might want to run a half marathon. They might want to, do a particular other activity, or just even, set themselves a certain goal. But then from a business perspective, there's a concept in endurance training, which is how the body actually gets better. It's the same as weightlifting. You need to stress your body to the point that it breaks a little bit, and then when it recovers stronger. And it's a scientific thing. Everybody knows it. Anyone in sport knows it. It's the only way that you physically can improve. But yet sometimes in work, we get to these stressful situations and we don't understand why it's happening, and we want to avoid it, and we want to get back into our comfort zone. So the big kind of message that I could share was, hey, stress is normal. Coming up to things that are pushing you in your work is actually something that's really good. And as long as you can work out that balance and get a good, supportive community around you, you can actually get through that challenging situation, and you'll be stronger and better at the end. And I think that was kind of that main lesson that I got between, going through the challenge of endurance sport and how that ties over to business.
I liked what you said at the end there about having a team and people around you supporting you on that goal, because although you physically are the person who is going to do the Ironman triathlon and no one's going to necessarily race it with you, you have the support and this whole support structure around you with your family and your friends, and maybe you have a coach, and that transfers to business. And, a lot of times people can feel very alone in their role, especially if they are maybe one person covering security for their entire company. But how can they find different people to be part of that support crew to make sure that they succeed and accomplish their goals and get where they need to go, and help them move through that challenging period? And I would assume that if someone is partnering with Trend, a trender can be someone who's on that support crew for them if they are feeling kind of alone in their own organization just based on their structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like you say, it's true for a customer as much as it's true for a trender. I always believe that to be successful at anything in life, you've really got to have your why. You've got to understand your why really well to get through like a really long race. Sometimes these races are 10, 11 hours. You've got to have that why to be able to make sure that you can understand, how you're getting through that. And it's the same thing. Cybersecurity is a really difficult industry. The news can be, horrifying to people. What can seem like a mess for a customer to have to try and clean up and get on board, and all of the problems that they're facing day to day can be, a much more difficult than just doing a single race. So I think understanding that why, and understanding that you're wanting to improve that world, and having those whys align really well. So, Eva talks about our biggest competition. Eva, our CEO, talks about our competition being the cyber criminals. So when we have that why, and the customer has that why, we're both just trying to defeat the bad guys, then I think, yeah, we can actually come together really well in that space. So I think those two things align together particularly well. And I think there's one other thing that aligns really well with endurance and cyber specifically, so more so than just business. And that's kind of around the different inputs that you need to have to get that output. So if you think about cybersecurity as a posture, as a, you know, we're a cybersecurity organization, we've got our hygiene going well, there's a whole lot of inputs that you need to do. So you've got to, you know, consistently make sure that your hygiene's done and that you're monitoring things and responding to things. If you want to be a good athlete, it's not just about running more, or it's not just about running faster or biking faster. You've got to look at your diet intake, your sleep, your rest, your recovery, and all of the different metrics that come along with that. So I think being able to sort of monitor those inputs and metrics and what that means from an output actually lines up really, really well. I've got a Garmin watch. It tells me every morning how well rested I am and what the training sort of looks like. And I've often compared that to, you know, the Trend cybersecurity platform and how that gives the same thing in a cyber perspective to customers. So again, it's funny, but all of these little lessons that we learn along the way and how those little analogies work.
Yeah, I think there are a lot more connections than anyone would initially think of. And yeah, I think so many people have different devices that are telling them how they sleep and how their body is functioning. And, you know, cybersecurity platforms are going to do the same thing, but for their organization's health.
Absolutely, yeah. It takes these complex inputs and gives you a simple output, right? So,
Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today on Trend Talks Life and talking all things endurance sports and cybersecurity. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. My two favorite subjects, so thank you for allowing me to speak on them.